remember writing a Hail Mary pass to Dr. Sadeo, begging him that I didn't take the economics course because I was just so stressed out by the idea of economics, and we had a very intense, very Soviet professor who many of you might have heard about by now, but he was an exceptional professor. I would have learned so much, but I didn't want to get necessarily outside of my comfort zone, and that's not what this regional degree is about. And so I'd like to encourage you all to, get outside of your particular focuses. And if you haven't determined it now, you don't have to find the perfect topic. Find one that's very interesting to you, and it'll mold and develop itself. And so I just say it helps too if you have something in mind right now, and then things will be a little bit more structured as you continue. I focused on Central Asian history and imperial politics because I found that very interesting. When I was 17, I went on an exchange program to India for a year, so I got to learn a lot about colonial British India when I was just a young man. And then, like I say, I got into the course at EURUS, and it was a marvelous program for me because at that time we had some TA-ships, and we had a number of working opportunities. And then after that, I can't say this in a COVID era, but we had these incredible lectures, guest lectures, and often Dr. Sadeo or Dr. Dukevich would trick them into going for a beer with us, and then we'd just be able to pick the brains of these ambassadors. And I remember we had the ambassador of Kazakhstan, and Jeff and I, like Dr. Sadeo and I, and this ambassador went down and, pardon? Okay, well, just want to be a little more respectful than last time. But anyways, I'm just saying, slamming beers, having like a real honest conversation with a person that knows what was happening in the room, and that's really exciting, and a small program offers you that. So I'm glad you guys are all here, and it's exciting to see the caliber of students that are going through EURUS still. So that's really awesome. Yeah, and I like it if you have a question, maybe, I don't know what the format is, but a question in the chat box is probably good.
However you want.
Yeah, and like, maybe, I don't know if this is lame, but I'm in the Rotary Club, and we kind of do like thumbs up if like you kind of agree with something, or I don't know. No? Okay. Anyways, so then I just say I graduated EURUS after 2 extended semesters, and I wrote my master thesis. Is so awesome. Never opened it again since. So just so you guys think it's the most important document in your life right now, I've never reread it. I've read the declaration to like my family. I love my mom, thanks so much, but never even opened the book. I'm terrified because I know it's crap, because now I know way more than I did then. So again, this is a learning experience. No one's going to read your master's thesis. Sorry. Maybe your parents love you. They might, but no one. Dr. Sadeo, your advisor, it's about structuring. It's about working through the process and learning a lot. But, Chapel Hill's not calling you for a book deal. And so I just say, like, appreciate the process. Don't be worried so much about the results. And so I graduated, bummed around Ottawa. It was 2009. I lost a bet for a bottle of champagne to Dr. Dukevich because he predicted the 2008 crash in the fall of 2008. I said, "You're absolutely insane." He said, "Oh no, it's going to be worse than the financial depressions that we've seen since 29. And as he explained it to us, and quite rightly, now that I look back, my generation had enjoyed, continual economic growth. Nowhere ever in the history of time had there been 7 years of straight economic growth. And so eventually it did collapse, and there was a hiring freeze in Ottawa. And of course, when I was in Calgary, I got an email out of the blue. In my last year in Ottawa, I had done like about a 6-week internship program at the Afghan embassy. I was answering a reply to, turned out it was the ambassador's wife. She was doing a research project on water rights in Afghanistan. I did, 30 pages of research for her. I got to know a ton about the region. They gave me a little stipend at the end, thanked me. But then, a year and a half later, I get a call out of the blue that they'd been recalled to Afghanistan and had started a company, and they needed someone to come over and help manage the company. So that was my first introduction. And in April, within 30 days, I was in Afghanistan and Kabul. as a private citizen, not connected to the military, not connected to any of the security strategies of the UN workers or any of that, just freewheeling in Kabul.
Okay, then you go ahead and talk about the time in Afghanistan.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I've spent about 5 years now out of the last 7. The first job I had for 6 months, I worked, as I said, managing that consultancy firm, and we were able to do like some facilitation projects for USAID and different NGOs that were trying to conduct consultations in the province. So we like do all the invitations, run around town, dropping off invitations to all the ministers and otherwise, and then, you know, facilitate the room and stuff. That was great because I got to travel throughout the country. I got to go to all the major cities, and that gave me like just a feeling of having seen the country in the first 6 months. And then I went to India for like 4 months in the winter, just chilled, backpacked around, got to see a lot of places that I'd been previously, and it was just a marvelous experience to see it. 10 years later, it just changed dramatically. And then when I came back, the former ambassador had become the foreign minister, well, deputy foreign minister, and he'd resigned from that position and taken a job as a country director for a large logistical firm that was bringing in all the food for the US military. So this is like a $1.5 billion a year contract for 5 years. And they needed an Afghan representative to talk with the government and who could facilitate a lot of the land issues that we had when building the facility. It's the largest cold storage facility in Central Asia, right outside of Bagram Air Force Base. So he asked me to come on as kind of his chief of staff and just manage his office. You know, we had guards and drivers. I'm sure you guys can imagine that in that kind of environment, there's a number of people that are just, you know, working with you. You got 15 guards in your compound. They all got to eat lunch. They all got to eat dinner. So you got 2 cooks. You got 2 guys to do the dishes. You got a guy that just opens the door because people refuse to open the door unless that's their job. It was a large compound of people. So it was like 25 people that I managed, all Afghan colleagues. And then after about 6 months, I'm sorry, can you guys hear my daughter crying in the background? I hope not.
No.
Yes.
Okay. Good. I'm sorry, I just didn't want the sound to be bad. Then after, like about 6 months of doing that, they had problems with a company that they were managing that did all the fruit and vegetable supply to the military. So they put me in there as operations manager, and I had 125 Afghan colleagues that were all doing the sorting and packing of about 40 tons of fruits and vegetables a day. So it was all local Afghan produce, and we had, you know, quite a arrangement of health requirements that we had to do and tracing where did it all come from. And it's the first time in the history of the US military that they've actually bought perishable food items in theater. So that was quite an accomplishment, because I used to have to, like every 6 weeks, I'd have to tour around an admiral or generals, and they would do all the food inspections of our facility. And I did that for 2 years, basically. And that included a lot of like regional travel, because we were looking at other revenue streams to try and export a lot of Afghan produce. But the logistics of exporting from a landlocked country is pretty darn hard. Even if you have a great product, as some of you economists know, it's supply chain is just a killer. And so yeah, that included a lot of trips to Dubai, Delhi, Oman, Egypt, Turkey, and it was awesome. It was awesome. I got to see the world, and my EURUS knowledge came in. You know, it helps if you can just even open a conversation knowing what the next 2 steps in the conversation are, right? Rather than them having to explain to you about what, you know, the social realities in Turkey, or the, you know, the economic challenges in Oman. You know, you just feel a lot more comfortable. And most of the people I met in Afghanistan, they were maybe, I'm so sorry. You know, they were maybe professionals, but they didn't have a lot of regional awareness. And that was what set me apart in that region. So again, I would say with your EURUS degrees, the best thing you can do is get out into the region whether you're doing, you know, the language study program or you're going to do some summer traveling, that's going to also encourage you to, you know, to look at other options about what you should do after you graduate, after you write that incredible master's thesis. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, and then I left. Enough of that. I took a year off and I just kicked it around, traveled a lot, went to another number of countries, a bunch of months in Africa and Australia. Working as an expat, if you arrange yourself correctly, it's tax-free. So that's really nice. And that way I was, you know, I was a non-resident of Canada. I only came home twice, 3 times in about 5 years, and just for a visit. And that was okay for me at that time. I didn't have a family or otherwise, like I didn't have my own family and children. And then I returned back to Afghanistan for a year, and I just managed the legal and local issues surrounding our depot, because what's become very evident is that the Americans will one day leave. And what's become very evident is there's about a $50 million depot that's sitting right there that eventually someone's going to get a hold of. So there's a lot of local politics and fighting. And let's just say the Lions were lining up very quickly, and, you know, I had to kind of arrange deals with the Lions so that they didn't need us. And that's just a lot of, if you have a contract for sewage, you should give it to the local people. The local people should benefit, you know, just like, you know, you want it, you know, when the Amazon factory comes to Hamilton, that's the big thing, you know, that it's about employment and you really can't argue with it. And, you know, we can talk a little bit about that, but that's very complex. And I just say, I'm fair game. You can ask me any question you want, but.
Anyone want to pose a question to Luke now? We're sitting sort of looking up like it's Hollywood Squares to somebody above you or below.
Yeah.
Sorry, my cat's doing weird stuff upstairs. I have a question for you, Luke.
Yeah.
Did you do like the co-op program when you were in EURUS? And if you did, where were your placements?
No, I didn't. That came like the year after the second year after, and that's just super. I didn't want to mention that in case they aren't doing that anymore, but that's just unbelievable. I just found that that opportunity to volunteer at the Afghan embassy on like Relief Web or something. I mean, it was, you know, something that was forwarded to me by a friend that said, you know, I'd written my paper on the war economy and opium developments in one of the EURUS MA programs. I've forgotten which one. So it was really top of my mind, and it was really exciting. But yeah, I mean, the co-ops are awesome, right? Just like all these guest lectures, you just put yourself in front of someone, you learn, they might have an opportunity for you, but you know, you don't learn anything if you don't leave the farm. So you're not going to get to meet any of these colleagues if you're sitting back home. I understand COVID reality. I'm sorry. I don't mean to like be insensitive about that, but I'm just saying, you know, that was my direction and my focus when I was at EURUS. I didn't always get the best marks on my papers, but I made sure that Dr. Dukevich saw me in the front row of his bloody lecture with some whatever, you know, a Finnish diplomat talking to a Slovak ice cream salesman. I was all in on that. Like, yeah, so that was fascinating, Dr. Dukevich. Like, because, you know, he's going to then answer your email on time when you're asking for an extension. Like, this is the beginning of business right now, is this MA program, you know, because everyone wants to succeed at what they're doing. And obviously Dr. Dukevich thought that Slovak ice cream salesman had something to teach us, you know, and I'm just saying that as an example, obviously, but, you know, you get out of the program what you put in for sure. And I'm just saying that, you know, doing the work and such matters very much, but it is a process. It's not necessarily the results.
Questions, thoughts? I mean, Luke, I'll ask. I want to ask you something about Afghanistan. Oh, Anastasia, go ahead.
I just have a question. Like, since you worked in Afghanistan, what are the challenges that you faced with the local people? because usually you have the language barrier, you have the culture barrier, and they sort of, I don't know if it's the same, if it's similar as in the Middle East, because I've lived a lot in the Middle East, but they sort of see you as someone different from them.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. I mean, it's very evident. I mean, it starts with the salary scale right away, right? Like and there is an embarrassment, a sense of like, what do I actually know? All I did was, was an intern in Afghanistan, at the Afghan embassy, I'm sorry. And now I'm here managing people, and that was a weird dynamic for sure. But one thing that I recognized immediately was that I arrived in 2012. The United States and the international community had already been there for 10 years. So there was a tier of meritocratic, advanced Afghans, a number that had returned, that had studied abroad. But there was also the development of, a lot of local knowledge and soft power, and English was the lingua franca. I mean, I can speak like passable Dari when I'm in the market. To a policeman at a police checkpoint, I can definitely get, 5 girls and a bunch of whiskey through a checkpoint. But I can't necessarily do, a legal contract or impress, an Afghan girl's mother. So that's basically my capacity in language. And my Afghan colleagues and I got along very well generally because, I treated them with respect. And you'd be surprised how many people don't treat people with respect. And I never lost that idea that I'm in Afghanistan as a guest, and this is their country, and they are always going to do it the way they want to do it. So that makes managing difficult, but that's where the nuance is, and that's why you get paid money and other people go home after 6 weeks. And so I would just say that in terms of security, I never feared for my life from an Afghan ever. I had, a couple of guns pulled on me and such, but it was just machismo bullshit. I was more worried about muzzle control from my own guards than I was ever worried about someone ever shooting me. And for a couple of years, I had my own bodyguard. He was a solid guy, and I just knew him. And I had an American Marine came and stayed with me as a couch surfer. And that was pretty funny because he was like, Luke, your security guard's on point. And I was like, I yell at that guy so much because, I'm worried because they can get a little bit tired in their job, But in terms of personal security, there was always the potential of wrong place, wrong time. I missed a couple of terrible incidents where I could have been killed, certainly. We had terrible bombings that happened downtown that, definitely destroyed parts of my house, upset everyone in my house, blew my friend off his feet walking to work. I walked into the office that morning and I was about an hour late because of the bombing. And I said to him, "How are you doing?" He said, "I was right there, man." He said, "I was like 100 feet, blew me off my feet." And I just looked at him and said, "Do you need a hug?" And before I even lifted my arms up, he just grabbed me, like that was real. There was, this situation and personal safety was something I guess I looked at as calculated risk. And I guess dating back from my knowledge and regional knowledge and understanding, I understood about the war as a business, maybe not personal. So I guess I always calculated where I would be and what I was doing based on other factors than just fear. So, and not everyone does that, and I maybe wouldn't recommend it because fear is a very important capacity.
So this is kind of a more general question. What did you find that the hardest part of adapting to living and working in Afghanistan? So kind of in terms specifically of your work and how things were done over there, and also just in terms of everyday life.
Yeah, well, Afghans are very private people. At night, things go really quiet. Only like the wealthy to middle class will come out, and there's not a lot of public, like all the bars are speakeasies because you're not allowed to drink in Afghanistan. I mean, Afghans, it's non-Afghans are allowed to import booze. So you get very good at, you know, filling a Camelback with vodka and bringing bags of wine because they don't get caught in the scanners. But there was 2 or 3 speakeasies we used to go to. If you went back to like 2007, 2008, there'd be like 25, 30 of them across the town. You can read about the wild times of Kabul. So that was cool because there was always places to go and hang out and meet people, you know, get a sense of connecting with colleagues from your home country and people that understood, you know, the stresses or challenges you were having in the city. I think the hardest thing for adjustment, the food's not good. I mean, you can only eat kebab so many days in a row, and I love kebab. I'm a beef farmer, but Afghan food, man, no. Indian food's my favorite in the world, but you eat it. It's fine to eat, but I'm just saying it's really heavy. You gain a lot of weight. I think our Uzbek colleagues would know about that, about the oil, the rogan. You know, you just a lot of oily plow every day. That's what the guards ate every day. They loved it. And I think, so that was probably the toughest. I mean, I would go 4 months, 3-4 months usually. Every 4 months I take like a 2-week holiday. So yeah, the R&R is pretty awesome. And if you're in the UN, it's every 8 weeks. If you're a diplomat, it's every 8 weeks. So how are you supposed to run a program that's worth $6 million where you can't go and see these kids that you're educating, and you're only working 55 days stretches, because then you're flying back to Halifax, and then wait a second, you get a month every year of home leave. So, and I know this because my wife was a USAID contractor for 5 years before she met me. You end up working like 100 days or 300, out of 360. It's crazy town, and all the while, you know, making considerable money. And I just say that those projects are then harder to implement. But I loved it. The work schedule was great to get out to. You know, I would travel 1 time a year. I'd come back home in the summer, and then I'd spend 1 leave in Europe, and then 1 leave like going to Asia, hanging out in the winter in some beaches or whatever. So that was awesome part. And you know, again, with the hardest part, air quality. Kabul is the worst air quality in the world. Freezing to death through the winter in the dark because the generator's broken, because even after 20 years of war, we still have no electricity in the capital city of a sovereign nation. That's a bad one. Everyone just burning coal to heat their houses, consequently, even though the largest gas reserves are right next door on the planet. There's a lot of gaps in the capacity of Afghanistan that don't make sense because the amount of money that came in so quickly fostered poor development practices. That's another day, and I'm not really the best one to ask about that because I didn't work in development necessarily. I worked in military logistics, which U.S. government pays. Don't worry about it, you know. So
I was going to ask you, Luke, you have the slide of a farmer holding broccoli, and I thought you could tell your broccoli story. That's success, right, in Afghanistan.
Oh, has that one got some mileage for you, Jeff? You used that one?
I've used that story.
The broccoli? Awesome, yeah. So that guy in the broccoli patch with me is Haji Manan. Haji Manan's just a great guy. Never let me down. And if he did, he was honest. He would call me and say, Luke, there's no broccoli. I can't get broccoli or whatever, which is very difficult with Afghans because they never really want to displease you or like let you down. So they'd rather just kind of like softly lie to you and hope you get confused. So he was a straight shooter because if the US military orders 500 kilos of broccoli, they want 500 kilos of broccoli. So explaining to my Afghan suppliers that it wasn't their mother's kitchen table that they were bringing the broccoli to. So if an Afghan goes to the market and there's no broccoli, he'll just get cauliflower and he'll bring cauliflower home. Well, this is kind of what they were trying to do, and I had to iron out and convince them that that was unacceptable. And so I just say that I get a call. So we're providing like 27, 29 types of vegetables, apples, melons, 3 types of melons, potatoes, onions, green peppers, tomatoes, everything, okay, the whole grocery aisle in the fresh fruit section, fresh fruit and vegetable. And I get a call from my Anham, the logistical company that takes my fruit and vegetables from me. They say that the military's found some caterpillars in your broccoli and got to cancel broccoli because we can't have cauliflower caterpillars or can't have broccoli caterpillars. I said, okay, well, send me the pictures first of all, because I never believe you guys. Like, it's, first of all, welcome to the war, guys. Sorry, there's caterpillars here, but okay, we'll play the game. And so sure enough, the military now, because of logistics and supply chain, and they got to send it all the way from Dubai. This is what my company replaced, was previous to my company producing Afghan vegetables and selling it in the Afghan market. The vegetables were coming from Dubai market, and so they would have been sourced from, you know, Kenya, India, Iran, all over the Middle East, anywhere that has water that can grow things. So we have no traceability. So they don't worry about that, because easily the Iranians could poison anything and sell it, get it into the supply chain into Kabul, but okay. So I call Haji Manan. I said, Haji Manan, I can't take broccoli because the US government found caterpillars and they have to shut off the supply for 14 days before I can get them to restart it. He says, Luke, I got 5 fields of broccoli here that are just ready to pick. I had, you know, scheduled it because I'm a farmer, and you told me it would be 500 kilos a day for, you know, 15 weeks or whatever we could get growing here. And that photograph's down in Jalalabad. That's the Kunar River, you know, 20 kilometers away is the start of the pass into Pakistan. So anyways, Haji Manan calls me back, Luke, you know, that's no good. I can't sell this broccoli because broccoli didn't exist in Afghanistan. There was no local market of it. Afghans had never seen broccoli. I had 400 kilos remaining in my cold storage. I told my guy, the one, you know, cleaner, hey, why don't you
continue on this story, but you can just mention why there's all of a sudden broccoli, because you had to make the Americans.
Oh, sorry. So this product, broccoli, did not exist in Afghanistan. Afghans never ate broccoli. They don't know broccoli. Is that sufficient? Are you guys caught up?
Well, yeah, because I think you needed to get it because Americans like broccoli, right?
Exactly. So we had to convince Afghan farmers to grow a product which they don't know what it is, of which there's no local market. And now we've just canceled $10,000 worth of broccoli because of one caterpillar. Now, if we're trying to win hearts and minds amongst farmers in Jalalabad, 20 kilometers from the Pakistani border, which is also like 5 kilometers from 5 other US military bases, I called the generals and said, I think we should take their broccoli, guys, because, you know, we can't cut off this supply. All these farmers are going to be turned into insurgents, really, or at least they certainly won't trust you anymore. And so they said, well, go and check the fields. So I said, all right. So we jump in the car, drive down to Jalalabad. It's the most epic drive in the world. Kabul down to Jalalabad is so beautiful. The Mai Par Gorge. And I went out, checked the fields with Haji Manan in Sukrud district, and I literally sent the picture back of me in the field to the generals to be like, look at all this broccoli, guys. Like, you can't. And this is, again, when administration and bureaucracy runs into local, you know, issues. It's best to find a local solution, because if you're going back to Washington and the supply chain, you have already ruined the relationship you have here on the ground. And I guess maybe that's a bit of a parable story for why so many countries had so many difficult challenges in Afghanistan running their aid projects, because they were run out of Stockholm, or they were run out of Oslo. I shouldn't have picked on the Nordic countries right there. They're the best in Afghanistan. But I'm just saying that was the broccoli story. Did I cover everything?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, okay.
Sam, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, when you were interacting with the local Afghan population, I know that you had a good time with Afghan employees and people who are working for you because you were very respectful. But did you find that maybe some of the locals were not happy with the North Americans being there, the culture of that? Did they maybe like really dislike Russians as a general because of the Russian-Afghan war? Like, what was maybe like the general attitude, I guess, of the local population in Kabul towards foreigners?
Yeah. I mean, there's 5 or 6 awesome books that could be written about the population in Kabul. You know, for example, when I first moved to Afghanistan, I lived with one of the uncles of the president of my company. He was in his 60s. He had lived in, first of all, he was a soldier conscripted in Dr. Najib's army, in the Afghan army, fighting with the Soviets against the Mujahideen. He spent 2 years, 81, 82, along the Jalalabad highway, you know, and he then traveled into Belarus and ended up in Belarus for 9 years and had a Belarusian wife, and him and I would actually speak in Russian. So that was pretty cool because he spoke a very simple Russian, and it was nice for me. And I call him and his generation like the Kabuli gentleman. Like, he would never be caught in local Afghan dress because in his mind, that was the past, and he was really trying to step away from that. His favorite movies were spaghetti westerns because he remembers being like, you know, 18, 17, going to watch, you know, all those Francis Ford Coppola spaghetti westerns at the downtown cinema. Because Kabul in the 70s was known as an absolute party town. People used to travel from India into Kabul just to party for the weekend. My Sunday school teacher when I was a kid spent like 2 years there on the hippie trail. Him and his buddies backpacked through it. So it was this really unique world in the 70s. And then obviously when the war came, there was no resentment that I noticed against the Russians. Generally, the people spoke quite reverently about the Mujahideen that fought the Soviets, because the Mujahideen basically took over the government post September 11th. So there's the government in Kabul is heavy influenced by the Mujahideen, you know, a lot of the Somalis from the north and Panjshir Valley. But I didn't notice any argument against the Russians so much these days. Against the Americans, I mean, you got to remember, I was hanging out with English-speaking Kabuli elite. Most of them are from, you know, Northern California or Baltimore, you know, that kind of Karzai tribe group, you know, assets of the CIA in the 80s that got their families out of there. There's a lot of animosity between, one of your colleagues here was talking about identity as in a diaspora. I'd just say that in amongst the Afghan diaspora, there's a lot of frustration because the people that left in the 70s were escaping, you know, the Shah's regime, not the Shah, sorry, but the King's regime. And then they went to Europe primarily. So you're going to meet a lot of Afghans from Germany and from the Netherlands. And then the ones in the 80s all went to the United States. So there's really, right now, for example, in the Arg Palace, there's a really big argument between the Americans and the Germans, Afghans, and who's controlling President Ghani. And that's because they all kind of have different masters, if I was going to say that. And I just say that the Canadians were really well revered. Even if you went to Kandahar, I spent a lot of time in Kandahar. We had a pack house down there. I love Kandahar. It's my favorite city in Afghanistan. It's so awesome. And Kandaharis are gentlemen. They're so nice to deal with. That being said, I didn't go out to Arghandab and look at the pomegranates myself. Like, the last guy from Oro Medante, where I come from, he died in Arghandab. So I wasn't going back out there. You know, that wasn't ever too far from my mind. But you know, I was able to travel a lot. I went to like 17, 18 provinces, and I usually went into a Corolla with my buddies. But that was because I had a lot of Afghan friends. We knew people on the ground. I was going to see a farmer. Farmers, they know what's going on. They generally have a cousin that's Talib, so if not a brother. I mean, there's an old joke in Soviet Russia, wasn't it? That you send the first son to the priesthood, the second one to the military, and the third one to the government. It was kind of like that. Like, the first son joins the government, the second son joins the Taliban, the third son hopefully works for an NGO to be able to write the legal paperwork for the second son or the first son. So they hedge their bets. Afghans, they recognize right away, like that old adage about you've got the watches, but we've got the time. They know the Americans were never going to stay forever because the Russians never stayed forever, the British never stayed forever. And that kind of doggedness and tenacity is not of an insurgency, I mean to say. I'm not referring to the people, but I'm just saying there was never a war solution to this, and it's really hard to listen to the peace negotiations for those of us that were involved. But at the same time, you have to know that fighting is never going to get rid of it. I mean, everything that we've analyzed and researched about, we recognize that it's just a continual cycle of war. So what's happening in Doha right now is really exciting. And there's so much distrust on both sides. And there's distrust in the sides. Like, you can't even believe how fractionalized the Taliban is. There's not everyone in the Taliban that wants to join the peace process. Like, I look at the IRA to start with, and the peace accords in Ireland, and look at how groups fractionalize off. And there's countless other examples, I'm sure, but that was the one that came to mind. And so I just say that it's going to be an even longer road to do the peace building as the peacemaking. And if they're able to have some kind of a successful agreement by February, and Joe Biden's going to leave quicker than Trump is, when I say leave, diplomatically leave, there'll always be American soldiers in Kabul. It's the grand chessboard. That's the original discussion. And that's some historical stuff that some of you may have read about, but I think it's too important a listening post into Iran, into, you know, Western China, into the former Soviet satellites, newly independent. Sorry, this is 10 years past, but from me when I studied, so I'm just saying that, you know, the Central Asian republics, I'm dating myself by calling them former Soviet republics, I'm so sorry. And Tajikistan is the best place in the world, because it opened my mind to what Afghanistan could be had there not been 40 years of war. I got to go to Tajikistan twice, and I just loved it. And my greatest regret is I had a skiing trip to Kazakhstan planned, but it got canceled in December before I came. So I mean, the region's amazing, and the people are great. I never felt insecure for myself, you know, person to person, ever. Like, you could, in Kabul, you could stand on the street with $1,000 over your head and shake it like this, and no one would touch you all afternoon. I guarantee it. Apparently, it's not like that right now. Sorry. I could have guaranteed it up to 2017 when I left, but I heard now there's groups on the street just stealing cell phones because the financial crash has been so hard, and now people are starving with coronavirus because food supplies are dwindling. It still imports a lot of food. So, but I'm just saying, great people. Really enjoyed my Afghan colleagues, and when we went out for picnics on the weekend, you grab kebab and just sit out by the river. Any farmer that come by would just want to share their things with you. We were out hiking in Bamyan one time, and we realized that we didn't have any food or otherwise, and there was a bunch of farmers cutting wheat by hand. And we just walked over and said salam and whatever, and they're like, "Non boho, sit down, come." Like, these people are making 25 cents a day cutting wheat by hand, and they're feeding us. And I mean, I'm making 10K a month plus. My buddy's making 15K plus. Like, what do you offer these people that just offered you lunch, and you're so wealthy compared to, you know, what they have? They're just gold people, and that's why I want the war to end. And I hope it can come to something in Doha. As much as it pains me to see the Taliban, who have been an enemy and personal enemy of me, specifically it's the terrorism aspect of it, blowing up our city constantly. I couldn't imagine what it's like to have people coming to your house and intimidating your family to be supporters of the Taliban. But just that feeling that there could be a car bomb anytime we're downtown, or the green on blue attacks that were fostered by the insurgency, it's really hard to think about peace with your enemy. I don't know. I don't wish that on any of you guys.
Any last questions for Luke today? Luke, we were, just to finish off, we were talking a little bit about how much we can, and I know you said you felt more Afghan than the Afghan president right now, and how, when you think of this question of understanding another culture, and this sort of follows up on some of the questions you had before, I mean, how much do you think you can know another culture? How much your time in Afghanistan makes you feel either Afghani? Can we talk about one unified Afghan culture? I mean, how do you think about those connections?
And Afghanistan's so diverse to begin with. You know, my chowkidar was Uzbek. My driver was a Pashtun. Most of my colleagues were Tajik that I worked with. To truly feel, sorry, your question was pretty academic there. But I just say about identity and truly know the Afghan people. I really encourage anyone that's interested in that kind of a question to read Rory Stewart's book. I forget the name of it now, but literally in 2001, at the end of the war, he walked from Herat to Kabul, you know, following Timur's famous retreat or attack on Kabul. But what he recognized was that Kabul was such a group of communities that what was surprising to him was that one community was the enemy of its immediate neighboring community. So it's so complex, and to say to truly know an Afghan, it's almost like saying you truly know a North American. And I'm not going to say that these are distinct, like I'm not one to encourage any ethnic challenges or divisions, but what I'd say is the Pashtuns are completely different than the Tajiks in many ways because of the experiences they had. I mean, in 1973, they finally allowed you know, Shiite officers into the presidential guard, into the military. There's a considerable racism against the Shia people in Afghanistan that's very evident today. The Hazara people, and they get nothing in the aid packages. I mean, central Afghanistan is more sparsely populated than the Pashtun areas, but if you look at the aid money, 80% of it went down south to 4 different provinces. So I don't know. That's super deep question to finish with one sentence, but I would say that Afghanistan is a very, very complex people, and I felt that I got to know them very well because they kept welcoming me back. Like and after 5 years goes away and you go back, you know what I mean? Like when my best friend, my best Afghan buddy picked me up at the airport the last time I went home, I said, holy, we started this 5 years ago. We were young men. And now we're older guys, right? Like he's getting married, I'm getting married, and we were just shaking our head. But I felt like I was coming home. Kabul was my home for 5-7 years. Like I had an Afghan driver's license. like you know, it's, yeah, I can't. All these characters I'm looking at are far more deeply knowledgeable about identity politics than me, so I just stumbled through that one. Sorry.
Okay, look, any very last comments or thoughts from anyone? No? Okay, well, Luke, I'll thank you very much again for joining us. And any last words of wisdom from you?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I remember you telling us as a class to work on our writing skills, that the government officials and people you talked to that were offering jobs just wanted good technical writers that could write concisely. That is an important skill, one which is totally transferable to all different fields. So work on your writing, those little one-page response papers and stuff. Every word is weighted and it matters. I'm a stay-at-home dad now, and I just moonlight writing proposals because I know how to write well, clearly, concisely, use adjectives, not the word very. And it keeps me in liquor, so that's pretty awesome. Like, while I'm technically not allowed to work in America because I'm applying for a green card. So I'm just saying that you know, you may overlook that and be focusing on gaining knowledge by reading and reading and reading, but really work on your writing, because that's why you're at university. You have the rest of your life to read, and you'll continue to read, and you'll read about stuff about this region, even if you become an accountant after this. But work on your writing skills here, and lean on your colleagues. I remember a professor said to us in our MA, if you haven't figured out by now, you learn more from your colleagues than your professor, you're doing university wrong. And I think that's really important, especially when you have colleagues from Russia, from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan. You're going to get just the depth of local knowledge that when you do meet an Uzbek again, you can say, yeah, I got a friend who's an Uzbek and they told me this. And that stuff matters. That's how you connect with someone and create a common bond.
All right, Luke, thanks again, and we'll let you get back to your daughter and your family, and I hope you enjoy your, I don't know if I call it respite, because I would say with a young one, how old is she now?
She's 13 months.
Okay,
so
so
yeah,
just starting to walking around now, so that's going to take some effort.
it is. Hey, and I just want to say I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone wants to send me an email or just look me up on LinkedIn. Pretty simple. Luke Beer. It's pretty hard to get wrong. I'm new. There's a couple in the world, but you'll know which one's me. And that's my email address. I'm happy to answer a question or direct you to someone. Like if you're interested in the region, maybe you want to look for a job or something like that. Do a bit of primary research and then shoot me some ideas. I'm happy to help. I haven't really leaned on the EURUS network too much thus far, aside from my colleagues who are in my cohort, but there's a lot of potential there, of course, so please. And cheers, good luck.
All right, thanks, Luke. Have a great night. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was fascinating.